Iowa's News Now Sports has your all-access pass to all things Hawkeyes. This is Eye on the Hawks.
But that's football. You got to move on, and whether you win or lose, you got to move on to the next challenge. And those aren't going away. So we know we got one next Saturday, and we got to get ready. That's our jobs.
That is football. 5 more challenges for Iowa coming up, starting with homecoming against Northwestern. That's a discussion for another day, though, as we welcome you on a Monday here on Eye on the Hawks. Mitch Fick, Owen Sebring, Mike Howell, recapping Iowa's 32-20 loss to the Michigan State Spartans. Both teams now 4-3, 2-2 in conference as Iowa makes their way back home. Thanks to everybody who's watching us at 1 o'clock on a Monday on the Iowa's News Now YouTube channel. That's where you can get all the video versions of our podcast, whether you're watching live or watching them later down the road. All the highlights and video of those interviews from East Lansing or wherever the Hawkeyes are playing that week. Of course, you got Eye on the Hawks on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, and the Iowa's News Now Instagram page. We get some reels up there as well of all this content. Well, Owen was on the field in East Lansing. Mike was up in the stands. Both made the drive to the home of Grayson Freund, Weatherford's meteorologist, who somebody in the studio right now is happy about what happened Saturday night in East Lansing. Boys, let's get your takes on what you saw there under the lights at Spartan Stadium.
I don't know if there's ever been, I've had a limited time covering the Hawkeyes in person, but just such a tremendous drop-off from one week to the next. I just had so much confidence going into that game because of what Iowa did against Washington the week prior. Just played nearly a perfect game against Washington and then come out and to play so flat, so poorly across so many aspects of the game. We're going to get into defense, I'm sure, eventually, but it was just such a weird contrast from one week to the next. I just could not believe what my eyes were telling me.
Yeah, the tackling obviously is the main one, and it's so disappointing. And there's been Kirk Ferentz teams like way back, maybe 07, 06, where the defenses weren't as solid, maybe as well too, in his 4-8 team in, what was that, 2012? 2012. Yeah, where you could see it and they just didn't have the horses. This is the first game where Iowa's really had some major injuries. I still think they should be able to compete, but the secondary is just not as deep as, we initially thought it was going into the season. We thought Nestor and Lutmer could come in and you wouldn't miss a beat, but you saw over and over again, that right corner spot, they're still figuring that out. You thought Deshaun Lee or TJ Hall would be able to hold down that fort. We still really don't know what's up with Deshaun Lee. I know Kirk was kind of asked about it on Saturday, and I don't think he sidestepped it. He was asked like 2 things at once, and he just didn't answer it if that was a coach's decision or if it was just an injury. I don't think it was an injury. He was suited up and everything. But I don't know if you got anything on the sideline about Deshaun not really playing that much or at all.
Not really. I hadn't hardly even noticed it until maybe a little bit later in the game where I was like, is Deshaun not out there? And I hadn't really thought about it until afterwards when you pointed it out to me. So that's something that we're going to have to dig into a little bit tomorrow and see if there's a disciplinary thing going on, or if he tweaks something maybe in pregame. I'm not sure what that would be.
To be clear, though, Deshaun Lee playing or not playing did not decide the outcome. I would argue Sebastian Castro missing wasn't 19 missed tackles according to Pro Football Focus, wow, which is a 3-word website and a 4-letter word overall in Iowa City. They aren't big fans of that, but that tail of the tape is right there. And boy, we talked about missed tackles just in the preview episode. There were a few early against Washington. They got cleaned up, and we've seen a couple instances here and there, an avalanche of them there in East Lansing. And you saw on a couple plays where, Lynch Adams would go on a big run and still get shoved out of bounds, but still on his feet. And that's the concerning thing when, some of them are 2, 3, or even 4 in one play where it's just, that's one of the shocking things, because a Phil Parker defense that prides itself on fundamentals and being in the right spot, just not wrapping up.
And like you say, against Washington, they seemed to get better as the game went along. They got cleaned up. It seems like against Michigan State, it got worse as they went to the 3rd and 4th quarter. The tackling just progressively went downhill. Childs, it's one thing when it's him, because he's a shifty, elusive quarterback, and you can kind of understand when there's some missed tackles there, but it seemed like it was a number of guys on the offense, and not even just missed tackles, but big plays. There wasn't maybe a 40, 50, 60-yard play, but I feel like there was a lot of 20 to 30-yard plays that they gave up too.
And that's where that right corner was really getting picked on as well, whether it was TJ
Hall or Nestor. Yeah, on the rewatch, I was just like, I'm not an expert on coverages and stuff, but you could tell that they were picking on that side. I don't think they threw Jamari once at least.
His way, yeah. No.
But over and over again, they were throwing towards Nestor, towards Hall, and they really just weren't able to make plays on that side of the ball.
And I should say, too, when we talk about the missed tackles, yes, the guys were getting targeted with the pass plays. It was the more inexperienced side of the ball, but the missed tackles, too, were guys that you expect. I saw a really bad one from Jamari Harris that he missed. Jay Higgins missed tackle. Deontay Craig was missing tackles. Those were some of those key names that you see on the defensive front seven.
This is according to Pro Football Focus. I just looked it up before. Nestor had 3 missed. Xavier had 3 missed tackles. Higgins had 3 missed tackles, which he had 14, so it's like you cut him some slack.
Yeah.
Quinn had 3 missed tackles, and then Jamari had 2, and he didn't even record a tackle, but that was more so because the ball wasn't on his side. But,
Missed tackles and missed opportunities. Yeah. We talked about, early in that first quarter, Quinn Schulte had a ball right in his hand, and that's not the Band-Aid on the bullet wound or anything like that. It's one possession, but there were just chances, whether it was a wrap, a pick there, something like that, where just the opportunities are missed. So let's get into the full look at the defense. Again, the most yards the Hawkeyes have given up in any game since the Wisconsin loss in 2019. First time they've gone a whole game without forcing a punt since the loss in Columbus to Ohio State in 2013. 11 years, pretty close to the day. I believe that was a late October, early November game there where Buckeye offense kind of did what they wanted against the Hawkeyes there. Jay Higgins and Kirk Ferentz on a day to forget for the Iowa 11 on defense.
I'd say it was just us not making the makeable plays. It started with me just missing way too many tackles. Being in good position. I don't think it was a schematic problem. I don't think it was a play call problem. Just think it was us not executing at the highest level we possibly could. You're playing a team like this on the road at night. You gotta play close to perfect. We just didn't play well enough to win.
It didn't seem like we were doing much really very well, very sharply. Starts at the line of scrimmage. Their guys did a good job there, and just one general comment: we didn't tackle well. Even from the sideline, you could see that. That was pretty much all over the field, not just one position, but we didn't tackle well, and it's hard to play good defense if you don't do that.
And that's probably one of the most shocking things, just being the defense that we're familiar with for the last few years. If the offense wasn't doing this, well, the defense was always either, if they started slow, they were going to figure it out. I probably wasn't alone in the sentiment. We'll talk about the offense here in a bit, but Caleb busts that big run, 75 yards, to make it a 25-20 game with 7 and change left. I have to think so many people thought, all right, well, here's Iowa being Iowa again. They're going to get that first stop finally. The offense is going to get the ball back, and they're going to sneak out of here with a win somehow, and hopefully Jonathan Kim doesn't have enough time to add a 7th field goal to either tie or win at the end of it. It just didn't happen. It felt like the shock of the Iowa State loss and the manner of the Iowa State loss, where you're leading by 13, you run for 200 yards. Iowa doesn't lose those games. The record is something like 79-3 since 2015. If they're up by 8 or more, they don't lose those leads. And Iowa, for the last 11 years, has been able to get off the field on defense at some point. It was just a very un-Iowa-like performance. And we talked about the variables that Michigan State got to set up for, playing 2 great teams and having 15 days to prep. And they looked like the team that had the time and then executed about as well as you could ask for, particularly in the trenches on both sides.
I really was certain when they came out, especially, the Caleb touchdown was one thing, but also that first drive of the third quarter when they marched right down the field and it was McNamara to Vanderzee for that touchdown. It was 12-7. I'm like, all right, we're cleaned up. This is going to be another tale of two halves type of game, and then we're going to be going back to Iowa City. But like we say, those defensive stops that you're just used to seeing them make, that's all they needed was a couple of defensive stops, and they could have turned them all over and gotten the offense back on the field. But it was just such a shock just to see those never come when they needed them.
The shocking thing I thought on my rewatch last night was, when I was in the stands, I was like, man, this is an all-time kind of bad Kirk Ferentz defensive performance. Then you go back and watch it, and it's like, the defense didn't play particularly well, and you could tell it, and they said as much last night. But they were in a position to win the game, and if Iowa scores any points in the first half, it's a way closer ball game. You said in the fourth quarter it's a 5-point game. They held a lot of those drives to just 3 points, and they got a heck of a kicker over there. I wonder if he's going to win, Big Ten Kicker of the Year or whatever.
National, maybe.
Better be special teams player of the week. I mean, I don't know if that's
That guy is good.
Pretty dang good, but at the same time, that was as much as the missed tackles were the story on offense, the story was just that first half you didn't do absolutely anything. Even after that pick set you up in plus territory, couldn't get a first down, long field goal. Drew missed another one, but it was long, so I'm not going to, discredit him. But I guess the one thing I'm more concerned about was just the push on the D line. It seemed like Michigan State just pushed them off the ball, which they haven't really been able to do.
Yeah.
212 rushing yards, and I know a lot of that. Some of those big plays were Aiden Childs, holding the ball and rushing and taking off. But K'Ron Lynch-Adams and Nate Carter, they had heck of a games. They didn't. I don't think either one of them clips 100, but they both had about 70 or 80 yards off the top of my head.
Yeah,
and it's just
Lynch-Adams led the team 15 carries, 86 yards. That's a nice little clip at 15 carries.
Yeah, for sure. That was the most shocking part, the push off the ball that Michigan State had on their offensive line against our defensive line.
Yeah, which has been such maybe the best part of Iowa's defense for a lot this year has been the defensive line, a team that doesn't give up a lot of rush yards, had only given up one rushing touchdown going into this game. That had been their hallmark, and they just got bullied on Saturday.
Just from the Big Ten in the last 10 minutes, Jonathan Kim, as you might expect, Big Ten Special Teams Player of the Week. Nick Marsh, 8 catches for 116, your Big Ten Freshman of the Week. And he was a kid that I believe missed a little bit of time, but you watched that tape from early in Michigan State's season. He's going to be special, I believe, out of River Rouge, Michigan, a kid who on the east side of state was making a lot of noise as a high school player. My sentiment after the game was Jonathan Smith was going to get Sparty pretty darn good again. Pretty soon he's too good of a coach not to. This felt like his spark of, again, played 2 tough teams. You get all this time to prepare, and then you get a big game under the lights, and it's always tough when you go on the road in the Big Ten and have to play a night game, especially if you're jumping a time zone. Not to, those are variables that all teams have to overcome at some point, but just felt like this perfect storm of stuff. And you see the numbers up there on the screen if you're watching on YouTube. The 19 missed tackles, the 200-plus on the ground, 256 through the air coming from Aiden Childs, 27 first downs, and almost 40 minutes with the ball. And again, to your point, Mike, about the offense in the first half, we figured out a few times now as you're watching some defensive lowlights on the YouTube channel as well from Owen's camera here, some big plays early and often for Michigan State. Iowa and Tim Lester using those first few possessions, just kind of feeling things out. They're kind of seeing how defenses are reacting. And then we've seen those second half adjustments more often than not for the good. And we saw it again, but there comes a time where, boy, you'd like to have more than just a 3 and out on your opening possession, especially on the road. We talked on Wednesday, it was important to get off to a good, quick start. And when there's all that meat left on the bone after 30 minutes, that's a tough pill to swallow, especially when you get to the back end and you wonder, what if there had been a little more to start out with?
Yeah, can't always start that slow, especially in these road games. And they've got a couple of them left in the Big Ten at Maryland and at UCLA. And I guess I don't know how you felt, Mike, being in the stands. While I was there, frankly, I was telling Grayson I had a lovely time there, lovely road facilities and great campus, beautiful fall foliage
People
this
were
time
nice.
of year. Yep. But it's not like, I would not say this was a terribly hostile road environment if you're a
Not at
football
all.
team. The stadium seats about 75,000 people. How many do you think were there? Would there have been 70,000 even? There was a lot.
I would say over 70. There were some.
Okay.
I thought it was. I guess I couldn't see the bowl beneath me, on the visitors' sideline.
Yeah.
So I didn't get a good angle of that. But up in the upper deck, it just seemed like. It did seem like it was probably like 85% full, at least in my view. Maybe less. Maybe I don't know. Maybe more. But no, I agree. It rarely got as loud as you're used to a packed stadium and.
Even being down in the end zone as Iowa was driving down there for both of their touchdowns in the third quarter, it's not like you felt like, oh man, this student section is really going crazy here. Like, it was just a very average college football atmosphere, I feel like. And so it wasn't even, certainly not the most hostile environment that they're going to walk into this year.
No, I agree with that. And I don't know, I don't think it was atmosphere more so. I just think, and I don't know what to attribute this, but it looked like Michigan State just came to play. And Iowa's, and especially in the line and all the tackling and stuff, it's just like they were flat. And I know Kirk Ferentz tries to keep them like not on those peaks and valleys of maybe some other coaches, rah-rah and stuff like that, try and keep them on the same line. But for whatever reason, they just didn't look like they were ready to go. And give credit to Michigan State because they totally were. They've had a difficult schedule. They needed to get a win. And just looking at their schedule, I mean, they'll probably beat Michigan next week, I think. I don't think Michigan's that great of a team. But they do play Indiana and Illinois, and they should make a bowl game. They play Purdue and Rutgers at the end of the year. So that's pretty impressive for his first year.
It's
Jonathan Smith.
This was not your quote-unquote typical 3-3 team. Again, 2 of those losses come against 2 teams that are going to be in the playoff that Oregon and Ohio State can win the national championship. They're right there. And Ohio State's a Will Howard second earlier slide from maybe beating Oregon in Eugene. So Jonathan Smith was going to have a good team there sooner or later. He's got a young team there, and they're already starting to show some stuff. So heck of a win there. But again, we turn back to the offense now. 3 plays and 3 yards and a punt to start. 3 plays, 9 yards punt. 4 plays, 5 yards missed field goal. 7 plays, 32 yards punt. 3 plays, 9 yards punt. That was your first half. Things came together in the second, but let's hear from Cade McNamara and Kirk Ferentz about the offense there in East Lansing Saturday.
Overall, I mean, we play better when we have some rhythm, and we weren't able to get any rhythm. It was a lack of execution, I think, in the first half. I think, overall, I think I just need to play better. I mean, at the end of the day, as a quarterback, I have to play better in order for us to win, and I didn't do that tonight.
We made a couple adjustments in terms of what we wanted to do, but sometimes it just goes that way. We couldn't get any traction. And they're an aggressive group. They're well coached, and they did a good job. We really couldn't get much started. I think we just had one drive where we moved the ball a little bit, and then ended up coming up with nothing there. I think we punted the ball in the end zone at the end of that one. Or maybe it was a field goal. But anyway, there wasn't much that looked really good. In the second half, we started getting a little traction and made a couple adjustments, like I said. But even when we were, getting within striking distance, they always had a response and an answer. Made it tough for us. No real discussion on making a switch. But, basically, we didn't do anything well enough to win tonight. And that'd be included, Cade missed some throws. So we're going to have to do better in a lot of areas. And, they'll go back to work tomorrow. We'll look at the film and see what it looks like and then just try to proceed forward.
Now you talk about missed throws. There was a third down early to Gill that was a little a miss there. One to Reese Vanderzee, who ended up having a nice little second half. And, of course, the interception that you'll see here in the video. But the calls for Brendan Sullivan continue, especially as you get into this homecoming game against Northwestern. Discussion for another day. We'll start with a palate cleanser. We'll roll some highlights on the YouTube channel, and we'll look at Caleb Johnson's 75-yard touchdown just so we can feel something again. Aside from this, 13 carries for 23 yards for Caleb, but sure nice to see him break out that long one that, again, kind of set the table for hopefully a situation where they would be maybe able to come back. But outside of that run as a team, 22 carries, 58 yards, and the one score, the Brendan Sullivan keeper there. One play was, again, a Band-Aid on a bullet one of a night for the Iowa rushing game against that Spartan front seven, because they were about as stout as you could ask for the green and white.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm not sure what happened on this play, if they broke down or if they'd kind of started to play against the pass game a little bit better, but that was just, you could almost feel the weight lift off of Caleb, and he even mentioned that in the post game, that was just such a relief to break that off loose, because they had him just absolutely bottled up the entire game. And they asked him about that too, that one of our fellow reporters that was out there in Michigan, that he said that that's the most jam-packed box that he's faced this entire season. I mean, they came planning for Caleb to get the ball every single time, and they played it perfectly.
Yeah, you're seeing a couple examples of that in the video here too. I think before that 75-yard run, I believe, is the longest run of the night. Second longest run of the night overall was like 6 yards. I mean,
wow.
They're just wasn't a whole lot of anything. You're looking at the interception there that Cade took blame for. He was expecting one thing from Luke Lachey, it sounded like, ended up being another.
And when I was rewatching that, I'm like, I don't even know what he was looking at. If Luke made it, there were 2 guys bracketing Luke, and there was a safety over top. If he even goes up, it's in a triple coverage, so I think it's a horrible decision.
Another
either
great
way.
throw, and we'll see the Reese Vanderzee touchdown too, but a great throw and catch from Jacob Gill at the very end, but Gill had stepped out of bounds, and you felt they had a couple cutaways on the broadcast to Jacob, and your heart just kind of sank for him. He looked like he was in a real tough spot, because, again, it was 40-some seconds left, but I think that was just their chip in a chair, so to speak. That was a big opportunity to have a shot, any sort of shot, and just another tough night. You heard the discussion, and Owen, you were there talking to Cade and Kirk getting questions about whether or not Brendan was going to come in. There was, again, Brendan having a rushing touchdown and was there in the red zone package again. What was the talk afterwards about the passing game performance overall, which obviously then just props up Cade's name more than anybody else?
Well, there was the big discussion, too, about why Cade was in there on the 2-point conversion. Not that, again, that didn't have any terrific bearing on the outcome of the game, but at that point, that would have made it a one-possession game. And
it would have made it a field goal game. Or
that what it
no,
was?
sorry, one possession. You're right. Never mind. You're right.
And I mean, I think Kurt gave, kind of the standard answer about like, oh, they had a look that they thought they liked better with Cade in there rather than Brendan. But yeah, it's worth asking like why, when Brendan has been your red zone, not even your red zone, but just inside the 10, inside the 5 guy all year, why switch it out now and leave Cade in there for this one play?
I think it just telegraphs that you're going to throw the ball and you don't feel comfortable with Brendan in there.
Yeah, maybe.
So that's kind of what I was thinking.
I think that's an important point, though, is people...
And Kamari was in. Caleb, he was gassed, but...
And people clamor for Brendan Sullivan, just like they clamored for Marco Lainez. And I get that he brings a different... We've seen one true pass from Brendan Sullivan. We hadn't seen any from Marco. And it was the elements there. And I wonder if that's, again, with the discussions of do you switch somebody in, if the coaching staff who... and fans will roll their eyes because we hear all about like, well, he looked great in practice. If they're just seeing something in practice like Brendan's not quite there yet. And again, that'll be all the questions tomorrow, especially as he goes up against Northwestern. And I do wonder like what Brendan's role is in prepping this defense for Northwestern's offense. Because again, 6 months ago, Brendan Sullivan's QB1 in Evanston, not in Iowa City. He's not QB2 yet. I do wonder what his role is, but then you also wonder like, well, what do the Wildcats know about Brendan? Because they practiced against him for a while there too. It's just an interesting dynamic. I think his role will keep being what it is, maybe still growing. I think we've talked about that for a little while, but I think the passing game kind of is what it is to maybe.
And that's why I don't understand why you can't throw in Brendan. I mean, he threw for almost 70% completion last year at Northwestern. I mean, it's a little different than last year because Marco was an unknown, but Brendan is a little bit less of an unknown.
Yeah.
I would really like to get in the mind of Kirk Ferentz to see why. At this point, you have 3 losses. Like you said in your piece last night, Owen, you're not making the Big Ten title game.
Yeah.
You're not going to go to the college football playoff. Mm-hmm. And Brendan Sullivan is probably your quarterback next year. Wouldn't you want to see what you got against a Northwestern team that he should feel comfortable against, knowing their defense? That's why I think this is the game where if you're not going to do it, you're probably not going to do it at all. And I'm not saying that Cade can't get better in the last 5 games, but I just don't understand what you're working towards if, those 2 top-line goals are off the table.
I think that the 2 things that are going to work against that are still, number one, that Cade is a captain. I think that weighs heavily in Kirk's mind. Like, okay, if I start Brendan, is Cade still the captain when he's the backup quarterback? Like, I think that the fact that he's out there leading the team onto the field every week still weighs pretty heavily in his mind. Not to say that he isn't going to make a change. I think that could be possible. I think that if Iowa loses one of their next 2 games, I do think that we see Brendan make the last couple starts of the year. But I think that the captaincy is a large reason why that would be such a difficult move for Kirk to make at this point. Am I overthinking that?
Cade being a captain is a massive thing. The fact that he continued, he was a captain for a good chunk of last year, even when he wasn't playing. So I think at some point, Logan Lee kind of took over that spot. Luke was also a captain, but also hurt. I do think that's a big deal, but also we've had. I don't think him having a C on his proverbial chest would prevent him from being benched or have time cut. I will believe there will be a quarterback change when the words come out of.
Yeah, sure.
And I really don't have a preference one way or the other. I don't think Brendan Sullivan changes the passing game dynamically a ton. I think he's a very good quarterback, and I think next year, he's going to do some good stuff. But I also think, those guys will bleed for Caleb. I think they just, or not Caleb, Cade, excuse me, and Caleb, everybody.
And Caleb.
I just think he's the guy. And I think that more than any captaincy or anything else is what either Kirk struggles with, maybe Tim's in the same boat too. I don't know, but I think Cade's your ride or die, as the kids might say.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, Cade is definitely the guy, and I think he's I don't know if he's the guy for this offense, this right one. You know, like you saw at Michigan when he had better weapons, stout, 4 or 5 star offensive lineman. He really could, move them, and he took them to a playoff appearance. I think you need more out of the quarterback position for this offense, and the weapons have looked pretty good, maybe better than we thought going in with Reese Vanderzee. He had a heck of a game. I mean, Cade did make a heck of a throw to the touchdown pass.
That's the best throw he's made at Iowa.
Oh, 100%. But there's so many throws that, I shouldn't say so many, but like there's like 5 of them that were like, man, you need to complete this one.
Chips are down throws.
Yeah.
Those third downs where you got to have one, or again the miscommunication it sounded like, or the misexpectation on the interception, because we talked about that too. That flush third quarter in Columbus and the Hail Mary, like that was kind of the hat to hang on, is that it had a decently high completion percentage, still over 60%, and really wasn't making dangerous turn the ball over throws. It was, well, at least if they're incomplete, nobody's getting that one, but you'd like some of those connect. And it's until it changes, if it doesn't change, will continue to be the talking point, because I think Iowa fans just want, I see as many Nate Stanley posts nowadays than I do about anybody.
Appreciation posts?
Yeah, appreciate, which, boy, where were you guys in 17, 18, 19?
And Amir
As
Smith,
this kid was
Marcel.
elevating and getting another win every single year, went 3-0 in bowl games. Like, Nate Stanley was a dude.
I'm always a pessimist, but doesn't that make you like, just, how did we not go to win West with Stanley?
It was close, yeah.
Like, with him and a wide receiver who's still bouncing around in the NFL, just kind of makes you like, what's going
that loss
on?
in Madison did a lot to that too.
Yeah.
2019 too, that we talked about, where it was very similar. Like, scored late, had a chance for a 2-point conversion to tie it up, and missed. And that was the one that Iowa's defense had a tough time against the Badger offense too. And boy, not to look ahead too much, but you talk about a Badger offense, it's figuring out in a big way coming up next week.
Yeah.
Boy, again, Braden Locke's your QB1. Even if Tyler Van Dyke came in, he's looked good. That running game's looked good.
It definitely looked better.
Luke Fickell's getting stuff to click too.
Not to get off topic, but you brought up 2-point conversions back then.
I'm talking about Wisconsin 15 or 13 days out. Go ahead.
I was 0 for 3 on the year for 2-point conversions. They had one against Illinois State, Iowa State, and haven't had one since that goal line package was in. But again, against Michigan State, they kept Cade in, and you could see they rushed 4 and dropped everyone else in coverage, and there just wasn't really a place for Cade to throw the ball. But they're also 0 for 4 on 4th downs, which
This season?
Yeah, this season. I can't remember if they had one on Saturday. That's last in the country, and only one other team has not converted on 4th down, Miami of Ohio. That just seems to me like, I'm not sure if this coaching staff knows how to pick up those yards, like just call the correct play at those certain times.
One is at the end of this game.
Yeah.
On Saturday,
Gill catch.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Jacob Gill catch. You've got the rushed one against, was that Troy? They hurried up real quick and tried to get it and didn't get it. I don't think this involved in there, but like the fake punt against Ohio State where there's the timeout. I don't think that counts though, because it was.
No, yeah, for sure, because that would have been a completed 4th down.
Yeah, I guess just put it in the basket with all the other worries and things to stress about.
Yeah.
That makes me think too. Just one more question before Owen. When you came and saw Michigan State just take away the running game, stack the box, and say like, "All right, Cade, beat us." And there were a few times where the play calling, you could see like when they did that swing pass to Caleb, gained 20 yards, pop pass, gained like 15 yards. It seems like they didn't, they still tried to commit to that standard running game, which of course,
instead of scratching where it itched.
Yeah. It's what I think if you would have hit on a few more of those, maybe the run game gets wide open. Taking the 75-yard run out, I think they ran blitzed. I could be wrong on this, and then once he broke the second barrier, there was just no one for him. But I just don't know if you put a little bit of blame from the offense on just the play calling in that first half, and just like they're definitely selling out to stop the run, and K's not going to beat you deep, but you have to think of something to move the chains a little bit. I don't know if that's what you saw.
Yeah. The only question I was going to move on a little bit to a different topic, but that is what still continues to concern me going forward. Like, as good as the offense looked at against Washington, as I said, just seemed to take such a significant step back against Michigan State. And I don't know. I just wonder what this team's rallying point is now, because the last few seasons, throughout the entire regular season, the Big Ten championship has been in the mix. I mean, to the very last game, or they've been in the Big Ten championship, and now that is out the window. Still with what do we have? 5-6 games left on the regular season schedule.
Regular season, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's just. I mean, that'll be kind of a talking point. Just like, what's the motivation now? Like, I mean, because it is kind of like, yes, you do want to play to get to a postseason game, but those things that we were talking about after the Ohio State loss, like, hey, all of your goals are still on the table. Hey, you guys can still get there if you win out from here. But now that's not a possibility. So what is the thing that this team is rallying behind at this point? Because they haven't really had that the last few years.
Yeah, that'll be the question. I mean, you can go 9-3, you can get a bowl game win and go 10-3, and I think there's a lot of pride to be played for. And I know with this senior group, they'll find things to play for. Let's try to cleanse the palate again. What's encouraging here? Caden Weegen's going to have a touchdown sometime this year, guys. Great job for him in East Lansing. He had 5 returns, kick returns, that is, for 145 total yards, along a 39, which I believe is the one that we got here in Owens B-roll here in the VO out of East Lansing. He is now second in the Big Ten in kickoff return average at 26.2. The guy from Northwestern is actually the leader, believe it or not, 27.6 yards a return. But he is there. He got in on another sweep. I thought the sweep game might break a big run for Iowa at some point. That was my big, bold prediction going on Wednesday. But Caden Weegen keeps showing that he is, whether it's at receiver or as a returner, didn't get a chance to return a punt return. Obviously, I think he's like averaging just under 10 yards a punt return this year. But you hang your hat on that. You got a good returner. That was the big question after Cooper went down, aside from just that whole side of the field that Cooper played last year. Caden Weegen's still doing nice things in the return.
Didn't you make 2 bold predictions that came to fruition? Because Weegen got a sweep as well.
I said watch out for Michigan State.
Well, no, I was going to say
that was my bold prediction. Is like be careful with this game.
I thought you said something prior to last week about like Weegen's going to get a sweep play or something because I thought he wasn't on a sweep.
Yeah, right there. I thought a sweep would go for a score. I just seen that pop up a couple times in film, watching that Michigan State had given up big plays on sweeps. That was a nice little gainer for him, but yeah, didn't fully go to fruition. But Jacob Gill had, I believe, a sweep in there as well. Good to see Jacob getting involved.
Yeah, both those guys getting in there for sweeps that they try to mix it up, and both getting snuffed out. I know we're trying to talk about the positives here, but Weegen was just like on every kick return. It seemed like, I mean, he was determined. He was bound and determined to get something out of it, and that was the one positive that Kirk talked about just briefly in the post game was, oh yeah, kickoff return game looked pretty good out there, didn't it? So they found something there that's working for him. What's interesting, thinking back to the beginning of the season, was that wasn't Caleb Johnson like kind of the return man that we were talking about?
Isn't he still listed as a return guy? Max White has been out there every single again, depth charts are what they are, I suppose. Sometimes.
So that's been a big positive for this team. Just that even though Weegen was a little bit of a known commodity before this year, he's come out and certainly is a solid presence out there in the return game.
And you guys know I've been in the Caden Weegen bandwagon ever since I said his name wrong last season and called him Wetchen because I didn't know how to say it.
That's a common mistake for folks that aren't from Iowa County. Yeah.
The PA announcer in Minnesota was saying it Wetchen too, so you're not alone.
Side note: the PA announcer at Michigan State was horrendous, and I can't remember why, but I remember him making like 5 errors on the Iowa roster. Yeah,
Minnesota did too. I
think they said Wetchen.
But Minnesota guy definitely was.
But anyway, I was in the stands, and in the first half, when he had all those runs, I said, I said this out loud because the Michigan State fans were around me and they heard me. They're like, it'd be novel getting him the ball when your offense can struggle. And then when they did that in the second half, at the end of the round, one guy turned around, hey, there's your guy. You can only do so much and do those jet sweeps so much until the defense blows it up. Well, they actually did blow it up the next time when Jacob Gill ran one. So, but yeah, no, it was encouraging to see that return game. And man, if he doesn't have one this year, I'll be bummed because he deserves one.
Yeah.
Either punt or kick return.
We could have let that little flag against Illinois State slide. Maybe just let that. I shared that a couple weeks ago because he was named like a midseason returner of the year candidate, and just still real to me. There you go. It was a great run. Speaking of having a great run and a really nice stretch here, back-to-back plays. Cohen Entringer playing not too far from his home.
The Reese Vander.
Back there, you got the Reese Vandersee. We'll get to Reese Vandersee. You were wondering why we weren't talking about that. He's in there. Definitely encouraging. But Cohen on back-to-back plays. Listen, you had the 2nd and 22 early in this one where Aiden Childs starts doing Aiden Childs things and getting out of tackles and weaving, and he's got a lane come down, I believe it was Iowa's sideline as he starts building up a lot of speed and leaving guys in the dust. And Cohen made a heck of a play. And again, if you're watching on the YouTube channel, you're about to see it. It was going towards the Michigan State sideline there, and he just gets a leg. Aiden, if he would have stayed outside, maybe had an angle, but Cohen makes a great play. And then the next play, right there for his first career interception. So awesome to see that. Left with an injury, sounded like maybe a hand injury, finger injury, something like that. Should be good to go. But I believe, Owen, you got a shot of Papa Endringer in the crowd here.
That's right. And the only reason I knew him was because I was taping my little segment before the game, and him and his wife came down and kind of said hi. They were like, "Oh, hey, we appreciate you running something on Cohen this last week. That was great." And so just chatted with them for a few minutes, and so I was like, okay, where is the guy? Where is he? Where is he? And so I was happy I found him in the stands after that one.
Awesome.
I mean, we see those obviously with the guys we know, like the Schultes and the Whites and stuff, but every now and then we pop one of those fans in the stands that, I mean, those moments for the parents are just, I mean, you have to know that that guy was just blissful in that moment.
It's that beautiful reminder that these are people's kids, and that, they've been going to games, watching their kids play for a long time, and you get to see them on a big stage, especially not too far from home. For Cohen to get his first career interception at a place that, you'd like to think he was a little familiar with. Sounds like he was a Michigan fan growing up, which that makes more sense, a little closer to Ann Arbor there, but just an awesome moment. Reminds you a little more big picture stuff there.
I had a question for a guy who's lived in Michigan for a little while. Is the Michigan versus Michigan State fan base comparable to Iowa versus Iowa State? Is it split, whatever you'd say, 70-30, 65-35?
It's majority Michigan. I lived there and worked there and covered these teams in such a strange time where it was the end of the Brady Hoke era and the very beginning of the Harbaugh era, and the era where Michigan State football went and won a Rose Bowl and won a Big Ten title, then went to a Cotton Bowl and had an amazing comeback win over Baylor, and then plays Iowa in the 15 title game and makes the playoff. We did way more Michigan State stuff than we did with Michigan, just because not only was Michigan farther away from Grand Rapids and West Michigan, so it was just more accessible to get to East Lansing, but they were far and away at times the better team. So we spent a lot more time covering them, so that was my focus. But it's still, maize and blue outweighs green and white. I don't know. Grayson, who's off camera right now, you'd agree way more Michigan fans than Michigan State fans in the state. Probably depends on where you are, but you're an East Sider, right?
Yeah, I feel like there's more Michigan, but lately I feel like Michigan State is kind of taking over.
Michigan State's kind of taking
She's
over.
not biased.
Yeah, exactly. And you went to school where?
Yeah, because they got the new coach, so.
A little more excitement from
Michigan
John
won
Smith, for sure.
Michigan
yeah.
won a natty last year, but
Yeah.
Michigan State's taken over.
There you go. Yeah, Michigan. Yeah, the hue of the national title, but also again, there are so many Division I schools in the state of Michigan. So you got your Chippewas that are firing up at Central Michigan, Mount Pleasant. You got your Broncos in Kalamazoo. In Ypsilanti, you got Eastern Michigan. You've also got folks that sort by Grand Valley State and Ferris State and Hope College on the east or on the west side in Holland is a fantastic Division III program. So you've got so many allegiances all over the place, and you've got Aquinas College and Calvin College and Davenport University there, and they've got big fan bases and big student bodies relatively as you get in there. So it's kind of like Iowa when it comes to pro sports. That there's just who's Iowa's number one NFL team? Well, there's probably 4 or 5 different answers. That's kind of how it feels. It's kind of how it feels in Michigan sometimes. I would say though, again, maize and blue. That's number one.
I think it just it was a thought of mine because number one, the attendance that was there on Saturday. I mean, I don't know. I assume Michigan fills their stadium pretty much on a weekly basis, no matter who the opponent is. Number two, just when we were talking to, I know we only talked to Cohen and Brendan, those two Michigan guys last week. But when we asked, you grew up an hour away, were you a Michigan State fan? No, Michigan.
Well, they're real close to Ann Arbor too. Both Davison and Ypsilanti are just right there. So I think that's common for working and living on the west side of the state. You're a little more, you're farther away from Ann Arbor, so you get those Michigan fans, some diehard Michigan fans, but again, just the success that Sparty was having and being a little closer to East Lansing, I was a little more exposed to that. Back to Iowa though, and let's talk about Reese Vanderzee. An incredible catch for a touchdown, his third of the year, I believe the most touchdown receptions for an Iowa wide receiver since Charlie Jones in 2021. Shout out to Chuck Sizzle with a kickoff return for a touchdown for the Bengals on Sunday. But a great catch for Reese, part of a 3-catch day for him. And boy, if you're looking for positives to build on, whether it's the end of 24 or going into 25, number 15 certainly showing off and making the west side of Iowa proud.
Yeah, good to see him kind of back making plays again. I know he had that huge season opener and maybe got a few more guys on the defense targeting him these last few weeks, and so Reese looks like he's back and just shows off the weaponry that Iowa has on the offensive side. I think I posted this last week that Iowa's had 16 different guys catch a pass this year, which is their most in a single season since 2018 already. So he's just one of the many weapons that this team shows they have the potential to have on offense between him and Jacob Gill and Luke Lachey. And when he's healthy, Addison Estrenga, Zach Ortworth had a catch on Saturday. So the guys are there, the weapons are there, and the options are findable when you can make it happen.
Yeah, I mean, that touchdown pass was needed at the time, and it was an awesome grab by him. And I'm excited for the future for him and some of the other wide receivers we got out there, like Howard and Gill, and it's exciting. I just wish this offense could get him the ball more, you know. You know, we talk about this, and if you look around any other college football program, 3 for 47 and a touchdown is a decent game, but it's not like gangbusters, you know. Like, we're just grading on a curve, it seems.
Yeah, through 7 games, 176 yards for Reese. That is second on the team behind 192 for Luke Lachey. He's 4th by himself in receptions with 14. And again, he didn't have a catch against Troy, so that's really numbers through 6 games at least when he's got an opportunity. But great to see it, man. Announced his presence with authority there against the Redbirds, and was a bright spot on a tough night there in East Lansing, and now he gets to have his first homecoming game in Iowa City. So we'll look ahead to Northwestern certainly on Wednesday. A lot to dissect there because of Brennan Sullivan and Jacob Gill, and just Iowa needing to take advantage of back-to-back home games, because after Wisconsin next week, they're not back there for 27 days until Black Friday, going up against Nebraska to wrap the whole thing up in the regular season, and hopefully with some good stuff to play for. Let's recap the picks, because boy, after the morning session, your guy was feeling real good about things, and then the afternoon games came about.
Yeah, not
taking a new strategy going forward with these picks. It's not been good for Owen.
Not great. You know, one of these times, one of us is going to have a winning record. I think you did last week, Mitch. But
man, I was I whiffed on thinking Michigan would have some stuff figured out with Jack Tuttle in that offense. But man, 2-3 after everything going down, I felt decent about. I mean, Rutgers.
Yeah,
Rutgers. Shout out Deshaun Foster and UCLA though. That's a heck of a performance.
I thought that UCLA team was already toast, but boy, they put up a fight. And boy, me and Mike sure called that Nebraska game well. My goodness, they just got their butts handed to them.
That was surprising. And you know, not to tie it back.
Was it?
And super 56-7, I thought was the score.
They're not 49 points worse than Indiana, but that Indiana team, and they lost Curtis Rourke, but they've got a really good backup. Indiana's for real, man. And that is a fun.
You're right. I didn't mean the win. The volume of the win was shocking to me, at least. I thought it was going to be a better game, and that, you know, not to be the super negative person, but when you just look at Curtis Rourke from Ohio last year, it's just like, man, you just imagine him on a night. Even though, like, you know, I don't think there was ever any rumblings that he would go anywhere other than where he went, but it's just like getting a guy who can throw the ball and make all those throws and move the ball forward with your arm. It's just, if that was in place, I think Iowa would have maybe one loss. But, you know.
There's just so much experience. I mean, Kurt brought so many guys over from James Madison and other guys, you know, Curtis Rourke, a guy who I think was at least a 2, if not a 3-year starter at Ohio. They just have so many guys with so much experience that were just, all right, here you go, welcome to Bloomington, go run with this program. And 7-0, man. It's, again, be thankful, Hawkeye fans, you don't go to Bloomington or they come here, because that's a special-looking team.
That has been the beauty of this college football season in so many ways. Like, if you're just a generic college football fan of the FBS level, it's like, I think I saw an article that it's the first time that Illinois and Indiana are in the top 20 since the mid-1930s, I think 1939, something like that. Of course, the Iowa State story that they're 7-0 for the first time since 38. They have never, ever been 8-0 for this program that dates back to 1892, I think. So going for history with I think they've got a bye week this week, and then they're home against Texas Tech the week after that, I believe. And then with the Army and Navy storyline, that those guys are ranked and could be playing for some.
They could play back-to-back weeks. They could play in the AAC championship game. And then
I'm rooting for that so hard.
America wants it so bad.
Tulane's going to end up ruining that.
We've got an election in November. We need America to be united in an Army-Navy game that means something in December.
Back to the picks real quick. Mitch went 2-3. I went 2-3. Owen went 1-4. I am now in sole possession of first place with a 16-19 record. It's you guys are both tied at 15-20.
Again, just a reminder, I don't bet college football, and the record is just statistical support of my decision to not do.
Do not take our bets. I did actually win. I bet Illinois to win on Saturday. And in Michigan, they have player props available. In Iowa, you can't bet player props. So I was looking at it. Caleb Johnson it's actually kind of funny. They were the same. Caleb Johnson under was 130.5.
Wow.
Cade McNamara's passing yards, 130.5. And I thought the play was, and I didn't take Caleb. Take the under on Cade. Well, Caleb went under, and Cade did go over and hit 150 yards. So it would have been an awful betting day if I would have actually took those bets.
Opinions on the Illinois throwback uniforms. I
loved them.
Those things are awesome.
Yeah, they're sweet.
So cool. I had somebody say that they looked good on social media, but didn't like how they looked in real life.
Okay.
If you didn't know any better, just like the quick glances, you're like, they're wearing the old leather helmets. I mean, they looked fantastic.
I almost can't believe that no program has thought of that about doing like a throwback leather helmet look until now.
It's super
It was
cool.
beautiful.
It was really cool.
Yeah.
Usually they just bet the helmets like brown, which looks awful, in my
I think
opinion.
just having like the matte look and they did it right. So kudos.
Quick
to
question
whoever
for your
made
app.
it.
Does Iowa wear any alternate uniforms?
They
this
haven't
year?
so far. I wouldn't be shocked if like the black pants come out this week, something like that. We haven't seen.
I guess they'll do the Veterans Day stuff that they always do.
They'll do that for, I would assume, Wisconsin.
Wisconsin's the blackout.
I've got a
So
hot.
there'll be your blackout. Yeah.
I've got a hot uniform take for Iowa.
Go ahead.
Okay, real quick, and this is like weeks in advance. I think Iowa and Nebraska should both wear their home jerseys every game, or every game they play each other.
UCLA, USC.
Like UCLA, USC.
I dig that, yeah.
I think that would pop.
I think it'd be super cool.
Just black and red.
Black and the red, yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder if that doesn't look good for people who are colorblind. I'm not colorblind, so I don't know. Maybe that's why they don't do it. I just wish they would do it. I think it would look cool because I always love that UCLA, USC game where they both wear their home jerseys and it looks dope.
It'd be a cool thing.
I would certainly get behind some sort of uniform thing for one of Iowa's rivalries. Iowa's got 4 trophy games each year. Like, have some sort of a theme trotted out there each year that like, all right, we're always going to do throwbacks for this game. We're always do, that, like you say, the home colors for that game.
Right, we could just wear red. Schools just not wearing their colors.
That could be too.
Subtle shot.
Mike taking, that's not so subtle.
Good for them.
The team that's 7-0. Hey, that was a heck of a win. Heck of a win against
7-0, but they're 5-0 wearing red in their uniforms. Last 2 weeks they haven't had red in it. Or Cardinal was.
Mike will be writing letters to everybody and names about that. We'll be back here Wednesday talking about the homecoming game. I guess, can we kill the music real quick?
Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry. I meant to ask this and I didn't put it in the rundown. Expectations for questions and answers we'll get from Kirk and Company tomorrow.
That's a good idea.
I think, what's going to be asked.
I guess if you're watching live on YouTube, hey, give us a question. Tell us what you want us to ask about tomorrow. One thing I was going to at least go back to being a positive was I don't believe Cade was sacked on Saturday.
Correct, he was not.
So, like, offensive line play, I mean, even though Caleb didn't have much going for him, like, offensive line, I think, still played okay.
Pass pro is good, yeah.
So maybe that's a talking point that, like, hey, offensive line, if we get a chance to talk to some of those guys, I'd love to hear how they feel like they're doing. We talked to Logan Jones after the Joe Moore Award nomination announcement, and so I know that would mean a lot to them. I'm sure big storyline is obviously going to be Brendan and Jacob. I'd be surprised if we don't get a chance to talk to both of them during media availability tomorrow. And I do think, even though we will probably not get a very tangible answer, I think that it is worth asking them, like, what is, like, your guys' reshaped motivation now that the Big Ten championship is out of play? What is it that you guys are playing for? And I know the soundbite that we're getting, like, hey, we are playing for, still winning out the rest of the year, getting to a good bowl game, finishing our seasons well, winning a couple more trophies. But just at least hearing what they have to say about, like, what the motivation is when you've had this focus of the Big Ten championship and the CFP, and now that's gone.
Yeah, I think they're probably going to get asked about the quarterback again tomorrow, and we're going to get a response. And I kind of think I'm kind of curious. I wish I could get in Kirk's mind if he's just so insulated in his program and he doesn't know that. Like, I watch college football, quarterbacks get benched all the time. Heck, Texas benched Quinn Ewers on Saturday and then brought him back in. I know they have Arch Manning back there, so it's different, but it's like, we're not like taking Cade out to pasture, right? He can always come back in if Brandon's not good. So I wish, I think they're going to be asked about that. I think we're going to get an answer like the same thing we've heard for a couple of years, that they're evaluating practice, blah, 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 and then sticking with Cade, which I understand. It's just sometimes those questions aren't answered to like we can't see the practice footage. We can't take your word for it. And there were years in the past where, it took Beathard a couple of games to start. It took Stanzi several games to start. So like there's a history there, but I don't think we're going to find anything out on Tuesday.
I'm very interested in whether Brendan's there or not. Talking to the defense about, hey, how much are you asking Brendan about? Because I imagine Northwestern hasn't changed a ton schematically. Maybe they've changed like some of the verbiage just to like, not specifically for this game, but like, okay, like we've got a quarterback who knows everything and now he's not in the program, so we've got to maybe tweak stuff. But I imagine like Brendan Sullivan's a big book of knowledge to lean on if you're the defensive, like, okay, like what have you seen and how much you can help, even if he's not on the field any more than he already has been. Like that's a guy to lean on, certainly in prepping for the Wildcats. No matter what you think of the Wildcats, coming off a loss to that Wisconsin team that we're trying not to look too far ahead against, but hey, any edge will help.
I guess I'm curious. I'll maybe ask this to a couple of guys. Like I asked this off camera the other week. Like, what does homecoming mean to you? There's so many big games for this team with all the trophy games that Iowa has, but homecoming is not one of them this year. It's Northwestern. So how much does this game, is this impactful? Do you guys really care about homecoming? Is this drummed up as another big thing for the program?
BTN Tailgate will be in Iowa City too, so maybe some more coverage of that too in Iowa City coming up Saturday.
I have a terrific question before we do go.
Sure.
Can you guys tell me which program Iowa has the longest win streak against?
The longest win streak against?
Yeah, of one opponent that they beat the most times in a row.
Well, I don't think we've ever lost to UNI, so.
Incorrect. They lost to UNI in 1898, I believe.
Oh.
But that win streak only includes, they've only played each other
sure.
like 8 times or whatever.
Sure, yeah.
Illinois' got to be up there, right? Probably not the answer because he hasn't said yes yet, but that's, I think.
The longest?
Up there. Northwestern they lost to in 17 and 8 and 20.
This is not active, I should say. Not active.
Oh, it's not
streak.
active.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
geez. And then I have no idea, and we're almost an hour in. I'm not going to.
Yeah.
From 1974 to 1994, Iowa beat Northwestern 20.
Oh, I knew that. Well, I mean, I was thinking of a team's like right now, like active one, but they were like really bad, and they used to beat them up pretty bad.
Yeah.
Also, it should have been a tell that we're talking about Northwestern. And I have a trivia question that's not related to anything you guys are talking about right now. Good one, Owen.
I said I have a trivia question.
Yeah, but I read
It should have been a
between the
dead
lines.
giveaway.
All right.
But yeah, 21 straight they had won against Northwestern. Longest of any program in Iowa.
All right, well, that's not in the win streak anymore. Now we can get the finale music going. Thanks to everybody for watching, listening, however you consume the podcast. We appreciate it. Back here Wednesday breaking down that Wildcat matchup coming up on homecoming on Saturday. For Mike and Owen, I'm Mitch. See you then on Eye on the Hawks.